about the tropical neglected diseases and to profile them in order to improve on the treatment and the cure of these diseases. Joining us for this conversation on the NTDs is Dr. Abdi Nasir Amin, who is the Associate Vice President Programs at the End Fund. Thank you so much for joining us. Maybe you can just begin by telling us, why are they called neglected tropical diseases?
Thanks, Purity, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here at the KTN studios, the morning show. So neglected tropical diseases, I think, as the name suggests, the operative word is neglected, in the sense that they are a collection of diseases and conditions that have not had as much focus as the diseases and conditions that we're used to. So for instance, if you think about World Malaria Day or World HIV Day or World TB Day, there's that, intense focus on those three big diseases. But it's not to say we don't have other public health challenges that we are struggling with as developing countries. So neglected tropical diseases are, a collection of about 20 different diseases. They are caused by everything from parasites to bacterial infections to fungal infections. So the idea of the World NTD Day is to bring that special focus and advocacy to fight these diseases, which often overlap with poverty and with rural agricultural communities which are tucked away, I would say, far away from, urban cities like where we are. So it's about time that we start looking at these diseases and taking them much more seriously than we have in the past. And the World NTD Day is supposed to bring that advocacy and focus into these conditions that I'm talking about.
So what are some of the examples of NTDs?
So examples of NTDs would be, I'm sure you've heard of, river blindness. I'm sure you've mentioned leprosy as one of the examples. I think something that we can relate to much more easily that we tend to see maybe when we go home for Christmas and Easter and other holidays is you see kids with distended bellies, which oftentimes is a sign of intestinal worms like roundworms, hookworms, tapeworms, and so on. Yes. So those are some of the quick examples that I can give. But also I'm sure if you go to some of the dry areas of this country, you'll see people who have red eyes, teary eyes, which is indicative of trachoma, which is quite common in some of those areas.
And the reason as to why some of these diseases have been categorized as neglected diseases is because some countries have been able to completely eradicate them. We are talking about leprosy. So why is it now important? Because this year's theme was on Act Now, Act Together, and Invest in NTDs. So do we have a recurrent of some of these diseases so that now so much attention should be drawn to them?
Yes, that's a great question. I think the efforts at controlling, so there's three kind of categories of effort when you talk about some of these diseases. They're not all equal in terms of investment and the strategies that are used to control them or to eliminate them or eradicate them. So control points to something which is so vast, so deep, that you can only hope to mitigate the impacts of some of these diseases. Elimination gives a hint of there is a possibility, there's light at the end of the tunnel, such that if there's concerted effort, you can eventually get there to a point where they are no longer a public health problem in most of the countries where we live. Eradication is quite difficult in the sense that epidemiologically speaking, strictly speaking, you're talking about not having that organism completely on the entire planet. So, if you talk of smallpox, for instance, we would still talk of elimination because eradication would mean that there isn't even, lab specimens living somewhere in some facility, even for research purposes. So not all of them are equal. So the focus on the individual diseases, I think, is in the sense that while we are talking about 20 different, cluster of diseases, there are some which are much more amenable to some of the interventions and the approaches and the technologies that we have. So I have in mind, for instance, affordable medicines that can either prevent or can treat people who have some of these conditions. So, for instance, I mentioned the intestinal worms, for instance, deworming, which has been, one of the most critical interventions that we've been having for a very long time, even here in Kenya, is a good example where you target maybe school-going children, and you are giving them albendazole or some of the medicines that are readily available. And the good news there is, in terms of the partnership that has been built over time, is that there's a lot of commitment from the partners in the NTD space, especially the big pharmaceutical companies, who have donated as much as sometimes $4 billion worth of medicines that can eliminate these diseases. So this is typically done through what is called a mass drug administration, where you target communities, you identify people who might benefit from some of these medicines, and then there's a whole social mobilization aspect to it. You go there and working with the community leaders, the village elders, the chiefs, and so on. And it's a whole, almost like a military type precision intervention, where you have you're weighing people, you're looking at the height, so you can determine what each of the people who needs these medicines, the dosages, and and all that.
And right now we want to take a short break, but when we return, of course, we'll be telling us why now the concern that now stakeholders are asking countries to act now. All right, it's time for us to take a break, but we shall be coming back with this discussion. Remember, Alan Ochanda is in Bungoma Law Courts, where the arrested members there by the EACC of allegations of irregular procurement is ongoing, and he shall be telling us especially what the charges again will be. Let's take a break. We are back with more. Stay with us.